My first one is a rational argument, where Eliezer considers the question, how can I construct an impeccable rational argument that Mortimer Q. Snodgrass is the best candidate for mayor of Hadleyburg?
Shout out for Mortimer Q. Snodgrass as
What
a
a
name.
good name.
And the answer is it can't be done. You defeated yourself the instant you specified your argument's conclusion in advance. He then points out that Snodgrass did really well on a questionnaire that unfortunately never got published, but you have access to, and you're thinking, but yeah, maybe I should publish this questionnaire because it polled really well with people. And you crossed the line, Eliezer says, you crossed the line at the point where you considered whether the questionnaire was favorable or unfavorable to your candidate before deciding whether to publish it.
Wait, this is like an aside just to how much I love Eliezer's writing, but I love his construction of these like examples. This year, the Hadleyburg Trumpet sent out a 16-item questionnaire to all mayoral candidates with questions like, can you paint all the colors of the wind? And did you inhale? Alas, the Trumpet's offices are destroyed by a meteorite before publication. It's just...
What was
so
the one that
read.
he did badly on one of the questions? Do you remember which one?
I think it was question 11. Are you now or have you ever been a supervillain?
All right.
Couldn't answer that one with a straight face, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Eliezer says, put yourself in the shoes of a voter still trying to select a candidate. Why would you censor useful information? You wouldn't if you were genuinely curious, if you were flowing forward from the evidence rather than flowing backwards from a fixed candidate.
Yeah. This is just a good illustration, I think, with examples of what it's like to reason from the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think it's indispensable. And it's hard not to do this. This is also confirmation bias. This is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing how to filter evidence that you're getting from other people, like we were talking about with the timeshare and stuff. Like the person selling you the timeshare isn't going to tell you all the reasons you shouldn't get a timeshare, right?
Yeah.
So you need to do that research on your own because you want to know, should I get a timeshare?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a good deal, but you're not going to hear that you're not going to know whether or not it's a good deal from the salesperson.
I want to hear, like, what are the downsides? Like, they're like, oh, you can trade with anybody all over the world. And you're like, okay, is that easy? So in here he says, a logical argument's one that follows from its premises, thus the following argument's illogical. All rectangles are quadrilaterals. All squares are quadrilaterals. Therefore, all squares are rectangles. This syllogism is not rescued from illogic by the truth of its premises, or even the truth of its conclusion. So that's a really good,
Yeah, he said maybe
demonstration of this principle here.
Yeah, maybe all squares are rectangles, but if so, it's not because they are both quadrilaterals. So always refuse to accept illogical deductions.
Yeah. He also, there's just like, it was just a line from here where he says, also, sloppiness is habit forming, where I sort of just wanted to pull that one out, where it's like,
just don't accept bad arguments even for positions you like.
Well, I was also just thinking of, I've had the most success with, like, I'm thinking again about, like, failing to be hard sold or to give somebody $20 or whatever on the street when I was just tired and forgot to, like, use the principles of, okay, like, I'm getting into this kind of situation now. I need to pre-commit to saying no, or I need to not get into the arguments. I need to not, it's hard. But it is also sort of important to remember, okay, sloppiness is habit forming. So the more you let your guard down or
And this was, this was pretty relevant considering the election we just had. That there were lots of reasons, people gave to vote for Biden, but ultimately I think the main reason was he's not Trump. And really you don't have to say anything else but that. He ends...
He's not Trump and he's not worse than Trump.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a person who would have been worse than Trump, but that was sort of earlier on in the interview where he was saying it was hard to imagine someone could be worse than George Bush. It was just like...
Yeah.
Don't even say that.
We were so naive. I mean, over the last 4 years, I've looked back fondly on the Bush era and be like, man, those were simpler times.
Remember when that was all we had to deal with?
I mean,
just incompetence.
And you mentioned, like, so one of the questionnaire items was, did you inhale? Like, that was the video from, Clinton and Obama. Both had videos from their college days of, yes, I held the joint, but I didn't inhale or whatever.
Well, no, I mean, Clinton literally said that under oath.
Yeah.
Oh, then I guess
that's why the joke became, I didn't inhale.
I thought that, and then there's no way then Obama's,
Obama was riffing on it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think Obama's like, I did inhale.
Okay, nice. Yeah, there was a Key and Peele sketch about that too, and it was funny. But
Yeah, apparently when Clinton was running for president, it was still a big deal whether or not you had done marijuana as a kid.
Yeah, I as dumb as that was, I yearn for those days when those were scandals and those were front page headlines for a week.
Yeah,
I'm confident. I know we're not talking about the election and stuff, but I'm confident about the Biden era. I think that he seems competent. He seems like he's a chill dude who will put together a successful cabinet. He's promoting like scientists to cabinet positions. People who are actually qualified to make decisions on climate change, for example, being the ones in charge of making the decisions, sounds pretty cool to me. And the push for unity and all that. Granted, it's going to be politicking and all this nonsense, but damn, that sounds relaxing. I haven't heard shit coming out of the White House in the last week. It's been great. Yeah. He's been president for 4 days, and I haven't heard anything.
I am all confident he's going to be so much better than Trump.
Yep,
I'll give you that. Yeah.
My hopes are for just a boring few years.
That would be nice.
Of like stuff happening.
I no longer want to live in interesting times.
Yes.
When you're talking about, remember when that made headlines? Or like, I keep seeing this headline this last week, and it's this clickbait headline. And it just says like, "These cocaine hippos have got to go." And I've resisted clicking. I was like, I can't click on that. I'm like, just don't do it. No, I don't even know why. Like, I don't.
Have you clicked on it?
No, I have not. All right. It's all I could see is from the sub headline that it's something to do with Colombia and cocaine, and I guess like they've got
smuggling their cocaine and hippos.
The thing is that like the world makes no sense anymore, and like it's gonna be hard to come up with like clickbait headlines that surprise you.
If I was a Colombian drug lord, having coked out hippos as part of my defensive line would be, I think, a not the worst strategy. Yeah. They're ferocious.
They are.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I think they sweat blood. No, that's not true. They have pink sweat.
But that's weird that they have pink sweat.
Something to do with some enzyme.
Hey, there's a thing at the end, near the end of the post, which I find interesting. He says, "Whatever actually decides your bottom line is the only thing you can honestly write on the lines above it." Which, absolutely true. Definitely something we should keep in mind as rationalists. But does this mean you cannot be an honest salesman? Because as a salesman, what actually is your bottom line is, if you buy this product, I will get some money.
I think that the way to shove that square peg into that circular hole is if you actually believe in the product you're selling.
Yeah.
Okay. And so like, granted, you can't tell. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, your mom was my realtor when I bought my house, and she was straight up. We bought a place. We did not buy the most expensive place because she didn't push for that one, and she didn't really push for any because she's dope. And anyone who wants to buy a place in the greater Denver area should contact Inyash. But like, she would come in and say, "Yeah, no, this is no good. This would need work. You guys don't want to. If you're going to make an offer, tell them to take off money for this." So I mean, maybe she's not a perfect case for like the salesman, but if she talked to find like that, they're your representative, right?
In theory,
yeah, but
in practice, not always.
At the end of the day, she doesn't get paid unless we buy something,
right?
So like, it was in her personal self-interest to get us to buy a home, and her very selfish personal interest, exactly, to get the most expensive one.
Yeah, but like long term, you could also argue long term best interest is like to get a reputation as a realtor who is a genuine advocate for you, the buyer.
Exactly, I've recommended her to my friends who are buying homes in the area because she was great. And like if she shoehorned us into buying some shithole, I would tell them to avoid her like the plague. Yeah. I think that like if you believed in what you're selling, I think you can get around that. Like, yes, your goal is to sell it, but if you believe you're helping them, it's like, yeah, man, I actually have a solution to this problem you're presenting, and this is it.
Every now and then we do recommend things on the podcast, and we don't get paid for it, but even if we did get paid for it, I don't know. The only time I've ever recommended something on this podcast anyway is something that I really thought was awesome and that other people would get value out of.
What was that?
I mean, the most recent thing I can remember is when we talked about the video game / what's the girl with the voice? I guess that's literally all of them. But no, Billie Eilish.
Oh, yeah.
The girl with the voice.
Oh, yeah. we were
the singer?
Yes. we were the human that can make noises with their throat.
We were trying to think of like just positive things we've been doing lately. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you weren't selling your own book, right?
Right.
Like, and when you do, you have solicited your stuff before.
Because speaking of which, I have written a book everyone can buy.
Yeah, called What Lies Dreaming, available at whatliesdreaming.com.
Yes, or at Amazon.
And the thing is like you're pitching it because you actually think people have fun reading it.
Right.
Yes, you make a buck. I'm going to hawk right now. This is the first time we've hung out together since the beginning of December, maybe earlier. You guys haven't seen the phone case, and I got to show it off today.
Yeah.
We have a merch line with phone cases. Even if you don't get ours, go to, what is it, redbubble.com or something? I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. And pick a pattern you like. The snap case, like the thin one, is like just, I don't know, a millimeter thick, and it is big enough to cover the screen. I'm selling this thing whether it goes in our pocket or not. This case is tight.
Cool.
If you like the picture, go for it. If you don't, there's everything on there. There's Marvel stuff. There's like chippy dippy space stuff.
There's Marvel stuff at Redbubble?
Yeah. Like fan art.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
They're probably pushing the line, but
yeah. That's Marvel if they wanted to. Well, Disney, I guess, if they wanted to, I guess could crack down on them. But that would get them some bad press.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they don't mind the bad press. I remember there was the thing, and I know we're far afield, but they gave some dad who was burying his dead son, they wouldn't let him use a Spider-Man headstone.
Really?
And like,
oh no!
And so yes, bad press. They're clearly not afraid of it. I think it was not just about like unlicensed use of our stuff. It's just like we don't want gravestones of our things. And I get where they're coming from. I disagree with it.
There's also a legal precedent. If you don't defend your copyright, you lose your copyright. That's U.S. law. So anything that got enough newsworthiness that like a lot of people knew about it, they'd probably have to say something about.
That's wild.
Like the fan art probably goes under the radar because there isn't anything in the news like, oh, you can get this phone case that someone made up, drew their own picture of Thor on. But if it went into the news, then they probably, you have to pursue that, or the U.S. government says, well, obviously you don't care about your copyright. Now you don't have copyright on Spider-Man anymore. It's a fucked up system.
That sounds insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So I can't think of a segue into we change our minds less often than we think.
Mm-hmm.
I think
just a fact.
Yeah. I mean, this, yeah.
You don't need a segue. It's just
next
post done.
By the way,
next post. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's not much. I mean, I think. Go ahead.
Okay. He started with a quote from a study where a number of people over a few years discreetly approached colleagues faced with a choice of different job offers and asked them to estimate the probability that they will choose one job over the other. The average confidence in the predicted choice was 66%, but only 1 out of the 24 respondents chose the option which he initially assigned a lower probability to, yielding an overall accuracy rate of 96%. Meaning that people were wildly underconfident in how likely they were to choose their more attractive option, and that people, even when they only thought it was 60% likely, were much less likely to change their minds than they actually thought.
What's cool about that is, and I guess I should keep this in mind because I've recently assigned a probability to whether or not I'll change jobs. And I need more data before I can put a pin in it for sure. But if I say 85, it means 100 basically, right? And that's a nice shortcut. Once I'm pretty sure I'm leaning this way, I can just stop thinking about it. Now, granted, you shouldn't. If it's important, you should like realize that you're making that error and like actually try and reassess, make sure you're weighing the cost and benefits and stuff. But I guess I wouldn't, you shouldn't kick yourself for saying, well, I was only 60% sure. It's like, yeah, but you were leaning that way.
Yeah.
So
there's a couple brands of appliances which I've heard you just should avoid. And last time I went out shopping for an appliance, like I looked at them briefly, but then I thought, why am I even looking at them? I've heard I should avoid them. I'm not even going to bother. So that's how I went forward, even though they were the cheaper ones.
Smart.
Yeah. Eliezer says, once I could guess what my answer would be, once I could assign a higher probability deciding one way than the other, then I had, in all probability, already decided. And realizing that can really save a lot of time and stress in your life. I saw Robin Hanson once post something similar where he said, whenever you are really, really torn between two decisions, it's often the case that they aren't very different. That's the reason you're torn. Like if one was obviously superior than the other, you wouldn't be torn. You'd be like, I'm obviously going for the much better option. But if they're really close, then which one you go with doesn't make that much a difference because there isn't that much difference between them anyway. So don't stress about it so much.
Yeah, that's a cool heuristic. I think it's cool to see this formalized. I had just like this very weird epistemology as a kid. I used to like write what I thought were these deep like truth things in my journals. I go back and laugh at them occasionally. But I do remember kind of starting from like really, I don't know, like black and white thinking as a kid where I was like kind of watching the behavior of people around me and tried to decide what I thought was good or ethical or whatever. And for a while I had this sense that you should be stubborn and stick to your, like I noticed though that people respect people who stick to like their guns, or like make a choice and then defend it. And then I remember, I think I was in, well, it's probably middle school. We were doing like some fake debate thing, and I had been thinking before about like, I guess about like, well, but like it actually seems like regardless of whether people respect you more, you might make a better decision if you're willing to change your mind about things. And it's obviously like if the other side makes a better argument, it makes you look stupid if you just stand there going, well, yeah, but this one is the one that I picked. So I remember just like, playing with this in this debate, by like arguing my hardest for the one side, and then halfway through getting up and then walking over to the other side and being like, you know what, I've changed my mind and I'm going to join this side. And I like that no one else did that. And it was just like, I don't know, the teachers were always like, they found me really weird because a lot of this like was stuff I'd been chewing on and writing in my journals and in my own head. And the actual behavioral outcome would be something that was like, why? I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. I was just like, haha, I did that. They're just like, okay, you're weird.
Writing stuff down really helps you process it. Like,
oh God, yeah.
I've come through many, I don't know, insights, decisions, whatever, by writing a blog post or just chatting with people on Discord. Just like getting it out in physical format helps. Sometimes I just write something up and I find that things have changed while I was writing it in my mind. And so I delete it, you know? Just having your
writing
thoughts.
It in your mind?
No, writing it like a blog post.
Oh, you're saying the thing in your mind changed. Okay.
Yeah, the thing in my mind changed, and then I delete the post.
Write in your mind?
No, like that's the thing. It doesn't work if you don't have it on a paper or on a screen or something. You actually need to get it out there in words, which is interesting.
Yeah, and then
at least for me,
seen interesting studies about. I think it's more about like committing things to memory, but I wonder if processing might work that way as well, but like manually writing things like on paper with a pen or pencil, at least,
you retain it better.
It makes you retain it better. I think there's something about, I gotta look into that again, but I have noticed just, I used to journal obsessively. I do it less obsessively now, but I still get a lot of value out of it in like an introspective sense. I largely for a while just went away from paper because it's inconvenient. You know, if you have a laptop or a phone, you just have infinite paper sort of. And then there's you can backspace things and you can, but yeah, there's, they have a different feeling in a way that's hard to describe. And it is kind of interesting where I think I remember when I was journaling by hand in a notebook, there was something about I was much less, just because it's difficult or, like a mild inconvenience to cross things out or erase things, I didn't edit. I would write a thought and then like I would see my thought sort of, like you were saying, change as I was writing it rather than, but like if I was journaling and just like text edit, I could write a thought, be like, nah, and then delete it. But so like if I go back and reread my journals about, I don't know, like that were in text edit, they sound more coherent, but like you're recording less of your own thought process, which is, I don't know, just random thoughts.
I think one of the things that, interesting things that Eliezer comes to with this post is he says, you might think that you can arrive at a belief or a decision by non-rational means, and then try to justify it. And if you found you couldn't justify it, you reject it. But we change our minds less often, much less often than we think. So kind of what is it when you tell someone to be a warning? There we go. A warning, maybe not to do that kind of thing.
Maybe not to make up your mind too fast.
Well, not just make up your mind, but even arrive at a decision before you've really looked into things. Like again, deciding to vote for Biden, I still think was probably the best thing for society because we got rid of Trump, which is great. But then trying to justify it and saying like, oh no, I have these other good rational reasons for it, I think was necessarily
necessary.
Yeah. Not just necessary, but I think that it would be somewhat dishonest. If you're like, well, I'm actually voting for Biden because of all these other good reasons, and you don't need those, and those probably aren't entirely true. They wouldn't end up changing your mind anyway.
Yeah.
You should have considered all that before you decided to vote for him if that was going to be the case.
And I think that, it's one of those things too, you want people to be able to say, I've changed my mind. I feel like this, like you can't say, well, no, you're just reasoning backwards now. In every case, obviously that's why this is an art that needs refinement and practice. Like otherwise you're just, throwing techniques around and doing it wrong. But like, you don't have to have been campaigning for Biden since, 2018 to say, I think I would have voted for him anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you can update, and yet, like, if your honest reason is the simple lame sounding one, which is I like him more than the current president, like, hey, own it. That's fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to, like, I don't feel like you in this case, you don't have to defend yourself with better reasons. It's like, no, I have my reason. That's it. Like, is that the best reason that I would use in every case? Not necessarily, no. But it's that simple here. Sure. Yeah.
I think that's a similar reasoning for people who voted for Trump. That maybe they have, they have justifications for why they did it, but ultimately they decided before all those other justifications.
Yeah, and then they, there's...
And then, they come up with things like, oh, but it's, keeping the parties balanced, or, trying to undermine the strength of the federal regulations or whatever.
Right. He's just joking or something.
Yeah.
And, this isn't the anti-Trump podcast, although we are all feeling that way. But I was just thinking, I couldn't get this out of my head so I saw that Key and Peele sketch with Obama inhaling marijuana. And like, that was the big thing, 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no one gave a shit. Oh God. Yeah. 12. 16? Fuck, we're old. In any case,
Obama.
Yeah. But, like, there's that video of, Rudy Giuliani dressing in drag and Trump motorboating his tits.
What?
And it's like, yeah.
Did this happen IRL, or was
this was a real thing? That they were doing some stupid thing in the 90s or whatever.
Okay.
But like this wasn't Obama. This wasn't the did Obama inhale moment, right? Nobody cared because there was no such thing as. I needed to draw attention to that hypocrisy. All right, I got to push past it, otherwise I can't be dissuaded from talking about it more.
Yeah.
So I like the end of this post. I'm sure you can think of at least one occasion in your life when you've changed your mind. We all can. How about occasions in your life when you didn't change your mind? Like, that's obviously harder because we don't keep a list of things that I still believe today that I believed yesterday. But I like the, in brackets that you put, can each of us think of an occasion when we could have changed our minds but didn't?
Yes.
And if I
were you gonna?
I was going to say I wish I had time to think about it, so please, go ahead.
The first thing that jumped into my mind was the first time I did mushrooms. I remember, I think this was because I had read Goran's post about doing LSD. Like he did I think a self-analysis or like N of 1 study that said of whether or not like LSD microdosing had any positive cognitive effects like people claimed, but he got it back when what was it? What was that dark web?
Silk Road.
Yeah, he got it off Silk Road back when he's like, so I got like 2 LSD units from Silk Road. One to do my experiments on, and one to use for a, in scare quotes, trip, which that was just adorable. And then like beforehand, he wrote a bunch of predictions and put percentages on them. And one of them was like that he would become religious or like believe in supernatural things afterward. And then, so I sort of, and he did not actually, it sounded like the trip was pretty uneventful, or at least from his perspective. And I had never done any kind of psychedelic, I had like smoked marijuana like once or twice. Later I found that can also be psychedelic. I had like had alcohol. And so I was pretty I was like, okay, like there are a bunch of people who claim to have had these like spiritual, like that was the thing that worried me, is like that I would lose my, beliefs in science and rationality after taking this thing, because like, there's quite a few people who do take psychedelics and then change religions, or like say like, they'd been an atheist before and they find religion or believe in aliens or something. So, but then, I remember actually while being on mushrooms, I was like, oh my God, magic's real. Not really that, but I sort of do remember having a few moments of, oh man, maybe magic is real. Like, because my perception of reality was so distorted that I saw things that seemed to defy physics. And then once I like was sober again, I thought back over those experiences and then was like, nope, that was drugs.
That's weird.
And it was this relief where it was like, okay, you go back to normal afterwards.
Yeah.
Unless like you probably didn't have very like solid foundations for your beliefs to begin with.
Maybe it's because I'm on SSRIs or something, but I've never, even while, really high on acid, I've never had anything like that. Like I've on more than one occasion, like communed with God while on acid. But even
sounds
at
like something like that.
well, but even at the time, I knew it wasn't really God.
Okay.
Like I was like, I'm high. This is great. Hey, God. Like I knew it was the drugs.
Okay.
That's because your mind is mighty. Mine, I get
Again,
thrown.
might be the SSRIs.
Yeah, little column A, little column B.
Okay.
I get thrown through the ringer. I haven't had any of those transcendent experiences where like I'm like they're internally substantial and like significant, but like I've never talked with something that wasn't in the room.
I didn't do talking.
Well, even in my head.
Yeah.
Like
it was like a more of an understanding
right on.
than any sort of verbal.
I had those like with different parts of myself, I think. But you know, it's I don't know. That's describing drugs sounds insane. People haven't tried it.
Yeah,
So
I know. And it's probably really boring.
probably. Yeah, I can't think.
It was really interesting.
I want to.
Before I tried any drugs, when people talked about it, I was like, "There's no fucking way that anyone can experience anything like that." And yet, yeah, you can.
I'm trying to think of a good example of when I failed to update sooner, and I'm sure that there's. I mean, I know I was just thinking about this like earlier this week or last week, and I'm failing to pull stuff to mind. That's not because I've always been right; it's because I'm doing a poor job retrieving it. But
maybe it was just because I'd already gone through the whole really truly believing in the supernatural and God when I was a kid, and then rejected it.
Yeah, maybe if you haven't had that, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean like a small example.
Believe.
Like I should have believed this sooner.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I was going to say for my example of an occasion when I could have changed my mind but didn't. Like 2 or 3 days ago, I ordered a new phone, and I kind of figured I was going to buy the cheapest one available for various reasons, which I've mentioned already. But I went online, I looked at the phones that were available, and I clicked on one of the more expensive ones, or just a step up, right? And I thought real quickly about it, and then I was like, no, I'm going to go with the cheapest one. So that's a recent occasion where I could have changed my mind, but I didn't.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of the only way that I'll know that this actually matters is if I could have changed my mind and didn't, and then subsequently changed it later. Like, because I mean, I could have changed my mind. I got was it not last night or the night before I got Qdoba? Like, I could have gotten something else. Like that's not interesting, right?
Well,
like,
I mean, I think that's part of what he's saying. That most of the times when you change your mind, or you don't change your mind, it's not interesting. It's just something you were going to do, and you go ahead and do it.
I'm trying to think of an interesting example where like I should have been faster to pick this up and then got to it later in life. And I'm sure that there are examples, but I can't think of one.
I have an example for myself. What it's gonna sound bad for rationalists, but when it took me a long time after getting into rationality to update in the direction, or to change my beliefs that a brain could be emulated. And that was from having just like read P.Z. Meyer's blog for so long and being like really coming into just like my first and like main love in the scientific fields is biology.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I'd seen so many arguments to get against Ray Kurzweil's claims that were like they were the typical like sort of transhuman futurist like over excitement that was like in the next 50 years we'll have a perfectly emulated brain, and it was a biologist saying like that there was actually the title of the post, and we could probably find it, was Ray Kurzweil doesn't understand the brain. I still remember that. Cool. And I remember reading all these things and being like, these make perfect sense. And then when I went to my first rationalist meeting and people were talking about I think it was Robin Hanson talking about brain emulation, I was just like, oh, that's bullshit. And they were all like, why would that be bullshit? And I like felt completely embarrassed because I was like, this was an argument that it was from like 5 years ago, and I had just never re-examined it and updated on it. And it was based on not even the claim of, can you ever emulate a brain? Is it possible? Is it going to be possible like for humans to do? Maybe. Yeah. But like, no, it is possible. And like, actually I've like updated much more towards it being a thing to, I mean, I really hope it happens in my lifetime. But like assuming we don't like devolve into the Middle Ages because of various political things or destroy ourselves with nukes or whatever, it's gonna happen, I think. I really like PZ's blog too. One of the posts that like has most stuck with me, which I think most people don't even remember, is the one where he said why it's okay to eat chickens, justifying it from a biological standpoint. I was like, cool, I'm gonna eat some chickens. And then I did. And nowadays that is like the almost taboo food for the EA side of the rationalist, since that's the highest suffering to pound of meat ratio animal. But
I've heard both ways, and I know we're this is probably the least interesting part of the episode for people when we're not even talking about the posts. But so for me, I feel like chickens are the better choice to eat because they can suffer less than cows. Granted, you eat more chickens per year than you could cows per year, but cows are also worse for the environment.
Yeah.
So I don't know which side of the fence to come down on if you're going to pick between one or the other.
I mean, I still fall back on which animal is the most conscious, most, intelligent, and chickens are really low on that scale. So that's why I'm okay with chickens, and I try
That's where I think that actually they're not as low on that scale as you probably think.
But they're lower than cows.
But are they literally like 2,000 times lower, or however many cows per chicken it takes to, how many chickens are there per cow?
Right.
It's not 2,000, but it's got to be on the order of hundreds, right?
Well, I mean, the PZ article that I'm referencing was specifically one that said, that argued that chickens are basically little meat production robots that have, very little going on.
I mean,
and
if you
he's
zoom
not
out
a
and
chicken
squint,
biologist,
but if you zoom out and squint, so are people.
Right? Yeah,
we're just vehicles for genes. They can do whatever you want to them.
We're much better at defending ourselves from humans that want to eat us than chickens are.
All right, so this is insert segue. Avoiding your beliefs' real weak points.
Yes,
this might actually, if I were feeling more creative, I could have thought of something about this might be a weak point against someone who's just against eating animals entirely or something.
Well, I realize that eating meat is one of my weak points, but I also am not in a position to not eat meat at all right now. So
that's sort of where I'm at. Like I eat a lot less meat than I used to, and I buy, as far as I can tell, ethically sourced eggs. Like other than growing them or whatever, harvesting them myself. I feel like I'm buying ethically sourced eggs, and so like I feel like as this is, and I know that I'm not even touching the post yet, but I don't like the, like, you're either doing it right or you're doing it wrong. I feel like you can be doing it better, and or you can be doing it less wrong. And like if you're doing better, then it's like that's still good. I think Scott Alexander made that great post about like if you do vegan one day a week, you're still doing better than basically everybody.
Yeah.
And so like if you're donating 0.5% of your income a year, you're still doing better than basically everybody. Like, sure, could you
0.5% enough to do better than basically everybody?
Probably, because almost everybody does nothing.
Who just aren't doing it.
A lot of people do some little bits, either around Christmas time or giving to their church, which I think should count as an contribution.
I don't count tithing. Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, whatever it is, like if you
that cancels out a contribution,
right? But I do feel like, and so with the number aside, like you don't have to be living, Will McCaskill style to be living an ethical life. You can still live very comfortably in a nice house and say, yeah, I still give 10% of my income to charity, and I am able to buy a new car or something.
As long as you do better than average, the average will slowly creep up, and the human race will keep getting better.
Yeah, and that's not to say like give yourself a pass if you want to do better, but like I guess don't beat yourself up for not doing perfect.
Right.
All right. Sorry. So avoiding your beliefs' real weak points. This is fun.
Yes.
He uses it in the context of a religious example at first, but you can use this everywhere. Like he talked about when his great grandmother died or something, and his grand uncle attributed her. He attributed it to the will of God, and that like he says even as a kid it seemed like I noticed that it violated the rules of religious self-deception as I understood them. And if I'd noticed my confusion, I could have made a successful, surprising prediction. Not long afterward, my granduncle left the Jewish religion. I guess we can read more of the post before we talk about like other examples of it. But you go ahead and summarize. I'm bad at it.
Okay. I guess in summary, it's that the modern Orthodox Judaism encourages people to be doubtful and inspect the scriptures and see where it conflicts with science, but only in places where they're going to win. I think the example he gives is that it wouldn't be surprising to hear a rabbi in his weekly sermon point out the conflict between the 7 days of creation and the 13.7 billion years since the Big Bang. But he has a clever explanation for it, involving 3 other biblical references, a midrash, and a half-understood article in Scientific American. In Orthodox Judaism, you're allowed to notice inconsistencies and contradictions, but only for the purposes of explaining them away. And whoever comes up with the most complicated explanation gets a prize. It doesn't have an emphasis on the virtues of blind faith. You are allowed to doubt. You're just not allowed to successfully doubt.
I've heard people push back on that successfully doubting is supposed to be something that you're doing, but that's also
the Jesuits, the same thing where you're supposed to successfully doubt, but it's always to ultimately, show how God is smarter than humans.
Well, and just from like the mimetic survivability of that idea, it's like if one of the virtues of it was to disenchant or disenfranchise yourself of it, the memes wouldn't survive, right?
Yeah, it's like its ultimate purpose is to show that my religion is stronger than doubt.
Yeah. I mean, the Jehovah's Witnesses had kind of a thing, just not nearly to this extent. It was like maybe baby modern Orthodox Judaism, and in 1,000 years maybe they'll get to there. But they would teach critical thought and debate in church every Thursday. 1 hour was devoted to that, for the purposes of destroying other people's religions and their religious beliefs to convert them to Jehovah's Witnessism. And like the vast
sounds like such a bad idea for their own survivability.
The crazy thing is, like, the vast majority of witnesses like stayed in the religion anyway. But I started using those tools on my own religion. I was like, hold up a minute. Why doesn't this argument work against us as well? And that was part of the reason I left. They taught me how to critically think about religions. And so, yeah, I'm assuming that people who really internalize this, will, I would hope that people that really internalize their lessons would leave the religion, but I guess either they don't internalize it or they're really good at doing the same thing here.
There's a lot of secular Jews.
Yes, there are.
And the ones that are religious tend to be like smarter about it, and for want of better words there, but I
don't know, man, like the crazy Orthodox ones.
Well, I'm saying okay, yeah.
I think that Judaism is a hard example there because there's a huge cultural component to it that is non.
Yeah,
I mean, true. So we had a discussion
with a very widespread of Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked with Lucian about does a religion mean anything spiritual or supernatural? Not necessarily, right?
Yeah.
So I think that when you say the Jewish religion, I think that there's definitely some equivocating there, and there's plenty of room for Mott and Baileying.
There's the John Stewart Jew who literally does not believe in the supernatural, and then there's the Orthodox deep God, I don't know where New York exactly they are. Yeah, deep entrenched ones where the women aren't allowed to speak to the men when they're in synagogue because that would be against God's law, and just really some of the crazy stuff that the fanatics believe is nuts. You're like, wow, okay, that's like any other crazy hardcore religious person.
So the trick here then is to attack your beliefs at their actual weak points.
Yeah.
And this is a painful exercise, right?
Yeah.
It
super is.
And it becomes easier. Well, it's easier to practice on targets that you're not super attached to. I bet we could reason you and unstressfully into why it might be worthwhile to buy a good phone rather than the next generation's shitty one.
Right.
But that's not something that you are really attached to, right?
Yeah.
So those maybe practice on soft targets, but it shouldn't feel like a fun practice. Oh great, I had this engaging internal or external dialogue with somebody about this, engaging with my doubt here. It's actually scary.
Yeah.
There's a real chance that you could lose something important. You could feel like you're losing something important to you.
Mm-hmm.
He says, people don't think about the real weak points for their beliefs for the same reason they don't touch a oven's red hot burners. It's painful.
Mm-hmm.
To do better, when you're doubting one of your most cherished beliefs, close your eyes, empty your mind, grit your teeth, and deliberately think about whatever hurts the most. And I remember doing this not early. I was I don't know, halfway through the amount of time I'd been into rationality and turned out against feminism and stopped self-identifying as a feminist. And that sucked.
Yeah.
It still sucks.
Yeah.
But
that was a big point of pride for me back in the day.
Which?
Being a feminist.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was, I mean,
it's one of those things that's why I dislike a lot of labels in the first place. I vote blue on everything, but I'm a registered independent, right? Because if the blue starts saying something stupid, I don't have to fight my tribe on it. So I avoid a lot of that by avoiding labels. I remember, I want to avoid more digressions on it.
That's the keep your identities small.
Yeah.
He says, continuing on what you were saying about the thinking what hurts the most, he says, don't rehearse standard objections whose standard counters make you feel better. Ask yourself what smart people who disagree would say to your first reply and your second reply. Whenever you catch yourself flinching away from an objection you fleetingly thought of, drag it out into the forefront of your mind. And I want to point out that the rationalist community is where the term steel manning first became a thing. And I think it was right around the time of this post where he said things like, ask yourself what smart people who disagree with you would say to your reply. And I think that's a wonderful thing that the rationalist community has brought to the world. And I also love the fact that nowadays, like it's been 13 years since this, it's a common term that I hear all over the place by people who, some of them aren't even aware of what the rationalist movement is.
Yeah. And
like I hear it dropped in just random political podcasts now.
Yeah, it's definitely common vernacular, which I like. And, it's like, I don't think that the rationalist community invented steel manning.
No.
But what they did was attach a handy label to something that was easily identifiable.
Yeah.
Like there's a long practice in like philosophy or even science,
principle of charity, I think they called it.
Yeah. And where you engage what you think your enemy,
Mm-hmm.
your opponent would say, like, in The Origin of Species, Darwin argued with people that weren't in the room about, you might think this. Well, here's my response to my anticipation of your objection.
Yeah.
Like, that's just called good thinking.
Yeah.
But when you put a good handle on the specific thing that they're doing there, and you can summarize it in a sentence, which is like, build up a strong version of the opponent's argument and then see if you can stand up to that.
Yeah. Steel man, opposite of straw man.
Exactly. But so that's what I'm saying. There's tons of value in being able to shorthand it. And now it's, like you said, common vernacular.
I was just thinking, Mott and Bailey seems kind of be a similar thing. Like Mott and Bailey is almost like a modified version of moving the goalposts, which has been, a thing that's been around for decades at least. I don't know, maybe the term is centuries old in other languages. But it seems to capture more nuance than just moving the goalposts. And I heard it just a couple of weeks ago on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, who I know they're familiar with the rationalist movement, but I'm not sure that they...
I think atheists have been using Mott and Bailey since, like a lot of atheism ended up being about like debating creationists and finding logical fallacies.
Yeah, but the term for it was always like moving goalposts or something, or some other fallacy.
I think I remember the use of Mott and Bailey.
I
don't know. I could be wrong.
In either case, the most recent time
by Scott Alexander.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, in a Slate Star Codex post a few years ago.
Okay.
At the very least, the most recent time I read this was this morning in the wise words of Enyos. Context aside, it said, that's the biggest Mott and Bailey ratio I've seen since God is love. And I appreciated the succinctness of delivering that point.
Mott to Bailey ratio.
Right, sorry, yeah.
Yep.
Let's see. This one ends, and I think that this also has its own page somewhere on LessWrong for sure, but the Litany of Gwendolen.
Can we all say it at once?
Gwendolen. Can we all say it at once? Would that be weird?
Let's try. 3,
ready?
2, 1. What is true is already
this
so.
This
so weird.
Nope, can't do it. It seems too cultish.
Yep, I'm out.
Yeah.
All right,
I kind of loved it, but whatever.
I'm glad you're having fun, but I couldn't. All right. What is true is already so. Owning up to it doesn't make it worse. Not being open about it doesn't make it go away. Because it's true, and it is what's there to be interacted with. Anything untrue isn't there to be lived. People can stand what is true, for they are already enduring it.
Yes. First said by Gwendolen. I didn't write down his first name here, but it's become one of those litanies in the community, similar to like the litany against fear from Dune.
I was actually just gonna bring up the litany against fear.
I got to hear it. I didn't read Dune.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will let it pass over me and through me. And when the fear is gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.
Nice.
Damn, awesome.
See, that's why I wanted to do that together. I feel like this is... Okay, so... I don't know. I actually recite the litany against fear.
Okay.
Kind of the way, like, Catholics would recite Hail Marys. And then there's even like a thing of like praying the rosary where like it's this mantra.
Yeah.
I like just sort of the idea of having rationalist mantras like this where...
I do too. And we have several of them, but the chanting them in unison thing was too far.
Yeah,
I
didn't enjoy it, but I do see the value. I mean, I think of the Litany of Tarski frequently. If it basically comes to mind without intention, which is the whole point. The point of doing of articulating and practicing rationality is that the techniques become flinch reactions, right?
Yeah.
You want it to be like, you know, we all have our shitty heuristics that are easy to trick people into believing or saying stupid things. The idea is to build in grooves that catch those before you get there.
Yeah, like martial arts.
Exactly.
Making something muscle memory.
Yeah. Krav Maga style. You know, if I find myself scared of a thought, I'm like, nope, hold on. If it's true, I want to believe it. And if it's, you know, so like that's, I don't usually have to go through the rest of it, but like, cause I already know, like, hold on, you just flinched away from that. Let's pull that back in and say, look, is this true? If so, this is what you want to believe.
Is Litany of Tarski the one that I want to believe snow is white if and only if snow is white?
Yeah. Okay. Or insert whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to believe that magic is going away from whatever. Yeah. Methods of rationality.
Yeah. That magic is seeping out of the world if and only if magic is seeping out of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
I kind of like to reframe it as, because there's something that's weird about saying that, like, I want to believe this thing. If it's a bad thing, I mean, like, I would say I want to believe it because then I can point my efforts towards, like, doing something about it. Right?
Yeah, but you have to believe that it's a problem before you can do something.
Yeah, I just like adding that there because, like, if you just say, I want to believe bad things, it's a weird thing to convince yourself of.
I have a good example, and I think it's a good note to end on. But first, for next time, be sure to read Meditation on Curiosity and Singlethink. And my note to end on with the Litany of Tarski is, I think that it's an easy example for many people to think of, especially people with, you know, raised on stupid ideas of masculinity, is like, if you're sick, you know, a lot of people put off going to the doctor. Oh, I'll be fine. Or maybe it's nothing, right? Instead, if you think this might be a problem, instead of being scared away from, like, oh man, if it's something I don't want to, people think, I've caught myself thinking, I don't want that to be true.
Right.
And so, like,
if it's true, it already is.
I don't want to face if this is like cancer.
Exactly. But if it is, you want to know, you want to believe it before, you know, you want to believe it as soon as possible.
If it's cancer, it is cancer, whether or not I believe it.
Exactly.
And I want to believe it.
And you want to catch cancer early.
Yeah.
Right.
And do something about it before it becomes metastasized.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to tell people what we're reading for next week? What the post is called?
No, let's keep it decent.
All right. Let's not let them think about it until we tell them what to think about it.
That's exactly. This should be a one-way channel of information from us to the listener.
Perfect.